A second I could have missed, split my life open. I was idling by the curb, the dash clock blinking 61:2, the Texas dusk pouring orange over the strip mall where the yoga studio shares walls with a nail salon and a place that sells nothing but succulents. The twins had just finished tumbling next door, their chalky hands printing ghosts on my shirt every time they hugged me. I told them to buckle up and turn to look for Sarah. She wasn't on the sidewalk with the other moms. She wasn't where she always stood, by the flyers for wine and paint night. She was in a parked Subaru 2 spots over, windows fogged faint as if the air inside knew it had secrets to hold. She and Melissa were inside, angled toward each other like bookends trying not to touch. Except they were touching, hand to hand across the console, not a graze, not accidental, 10 fingers threaded and still. It's surprising the things your body does before your brain decides to let you think. I killed the engine. I told the twins I'd be right back and that the radio station stays put. I walked past the hood of the Subaru and pretended I'd only now noticed them. Sarah's face went through a whole slideshow, guilt, terror, PR smile. The kind of thing I've seen her pull at office parties when her boss tells a joke that reads like a harassment seminar starter pack. Melissa, for her part, was composed, yoga composed. That still water look that makes you wonder if the calm is a move or a truth. I knocked on the window like a polite stranger. Sarah flinched, dropped Melissa's hand, and started pawing for the door handle. The door opened, and the smell hit first, eucalyptus and that sweet sour edge of a car that's been driven hard with the IC off. "Hey," I said calmly, too calmly, the kind of calm a guy puts on when he's trying not to bleed in front of his kids. "Mike," Sarah said, and everything in my name broke. "We were just talking," Melissa finished for her, voice warm enough to pour over pancakes. "We're co-leading the women's retreat next month. Logistics." "Logistics," I repeated. "I'm an electrician. Logistics are the difference between a breaker you can trust and a hospital generator that fails when the wind screams. You feel the lie, sometimes like a buzzing outlet." Behind me, one of our twins leaned across the back seat of the truck and shouted, "Dad, they're playing Taylor. Can we turn it up?" The innocence of it put a hand on my chest and pressed. I waved at the kids, did the universal parent pantomime for 1 second, and turned back to the two women like I hadn't just seen the oldest signal in human history. "I'll see you at home," Sarah said softly, already pulling the door toward closed. "Great," I said, and stepped back, and watched my wife leave the parking lot with her hands diligently at 10 and 2. I drove the kids home, my ears weirdly focused on the turn signal, like that rhythmic click was trying to talk me out of something. At every red light, I told myself I might have misread. I replayed the image hands, joined, and tried to Photoshop a different truth over it. The twins argued about whether we should have tacos or grilled cheese. Life was busy being life. At home, the dogs did their frantic hello, gums, and nails and joy. I fed the kids and tried to cut tomatoes without cutting myself. I checked my phone to see if Sarah had texted and saw the read receipts from earlier, those little gray confirmations that we've come to accept as proof of caring. Nothing since. I put the twins in the bath and watched bubbles turn into hats. When I bent to drain the tub, I felt the bones in my back pop like a zip tie breaking, and I thought, stupidly, that I always feel that after a big job. I wondered exactly what job I just had done to me. When Sarah came through the door at 7021, she went directly to our room like a woman who knows the furniture in the dark. I let the kids pick a cartoon, muted it, and waited long enough to count to 102 slowly. In the bedroom, Sarah was sitting on the end of the bed, hands in her lap as if we were visiting a prison. She was still in yoga clothes, still dewy. The ceiling fan made little vortices in the air above us. I sat in the chair by the window, the one where I read wiring diagrams when I'm too wired to sleep. "I saw you," I started, because I didn't know how to be a poet about this. Holding hands. She looked up, and her eyes did that brimming thing I usually can't stand to see. Tonight I couldn't tell if the brimming was honest or something she'd learned in a meeting. "It wasn't what you think." "You think?" "I think you were making out in the Subaru," I said. "I think you were holding hands in a way that wasn't for logistics." Silence spun a few times. "I'm not sleeping with her," Sarah said. "I swear to God, it's not physical." "Okay," I said, and discovered that a word can weigh a whole room if you let it. "But it is something." She ran a finger along her thigh, pressing a line into the lycra as if she could draw herself a script. "I've been lonely," she said. "Melissa listens. She gets it. She sees me." I resisted the urge to say, I see you every morning when I hand you your coffee. I didn't say I see you in the budget spreadsheet line by line. I didn't say I'm the one who built the dimmer switch that makes your bathroom mirror soft as dawn because sunlight is mean to women's faces, your words, not mine. Instead, I stayed in the chair and listened to my wife explain a faith I didn't share. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. It started with the retreats. It's just connection, that's all. You can know things about electricity that also apply to people. Current follows the easiest path. It runs where it's welcomed, and it keeps running until you shut the circuit off. Connection is a circuit. Once you wire it, it'll carry everything you give it. Is this a sponsor thing? I asked. Not because Sarah's in recovery, but because I've heard Melissa call women in her circle my girls, the way a sponsor does, that power braid of intimacy and authority. Is this part of the program? It's a safe space, Sarah said, and if there were two words that could make a man feel like a barbed wire fence, those were them. We talked in circles until the kids came in and asked if it was too late for popsicles. Sarah wiped her eyes and said no, and we ate frozen sugar on the porch, the night insects tuning up like a pit orchestra. The next morning, the neighbor from across the street did that suburban hover near our mailbox. That means she knows something and wants to be the kind of person who doesn't gossip while also immediately gossiping. Lydia is the kind of woman who squeezes my forearm when she laughs like I'm more masculine than I am, and I always feel like I should live up to it. I don't want to overstep, she said, overstepping, but I saw Sarah and Melissa at Joe's this morning and they were very, close. Like heads together. I thought you should know, woman to man. Thanks, I said, because I didn't trust what else might come out. At lunch, because self-harm finds its own channels, I typed Melissa's name into Facebook. Her profile was all yoga sunrises and inspirational quotes that felt like fortune cookies pretending to be philosophers. On the page for Prana in the Pines Women's Retreat, there were photos from last month's trip. Melissa in staff black, hair haloed by golden hour. Sarah in a white sweater I'd never seen, standing on a dock with Melissa, their arms wrapped around each other's backs, both of them looking out at a lake like it was teaching them something. The caption said, "Being held by community is the body remembering itself." There were comments with heart emojis and women writing, "I felt so seen. My thumbs had that prickly electricity that tells you you've stared too long at something you shouldn't." That night I asked, and we did the dance again. Sarah insisted nothing physical had happened. I almost wanted to be told the worst truth so I could stop spinning. Instead, I got a word I'd heard before but never had to define in my house: emotional. The next week, prove, became a sport I didn't know I would play. A charge from Prana Retreats LLC landed on our joint card twice, and when I asked, Sarah said she'd covered a friend's fee. There was a Venmo between Sarah and Melissa with 3 lemon emojis for lemon water cleanse supplies. Location sharing, which we'd had on for years so we could pick each other up from car services or check traffic, disappeared with a firmware update and didn't come back. She said she'd reset it later and later never came. She said she'd reset it later and later never came. Melissa's Subaru started showing up on the ring cam timestamp at 10:05:01 p.m. on a Tuesday, at 6:03 a.m. on a Saturday. I didn't see faces, just a constellation of events that, when you connected them, looked like something particular, like the Big Dipper. You can tell yourself a star isn't a spoon. The shape remains. My brother, Cody, a paramedic with a knack for saying truth the way you deliver bad weather, texted me a photo from Barton Springs. He'd run into Sarah and Melissa there on his morning run. They were smiling, wet hair, 2 towels like stripes. "Didn't know Sarah was a dawn swimmer," he wrote, and then, because he knows how to be a brother, "You good?" I wasn't. But I said I was, because the alternative would have required a conversation I wasn't ready to have when I was standing on a ladder, shoulder deep in a tangle of conduit at a job site south of Ben White. Work felt different, with everything shivering under the surface. On Wednesday, mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from one of Sarah's coworkers. "We're not friends, but we follow each other on Instagram because of a Cinco de Mayo barbecue 2 years ago, where everyone promised to hang out more." She sent me a story clip she'd recorded at a retreat, graduation. It was the end of a weekend where Sarah had volunteered. In the clip, women stood in a circle, eyes closed, hands on hearts. Melissa walked the inside ring, touching shoulders. When she reached Sarah, her hand lingered, then slid down Sarah's arm, and briefly, so briefly, their fingers laced. The clip ended. The message said, "Is this weird to send? I'm sorry if it is. If I were you, I'd want to know." That night, I put the kids to bed, kissed 2 foreheads, and asked Sarah one more time. She didn't deflect. She didn't cry. She did something worse. She got clinical. If you need me to say words like emotional affairs to validate your feelings, fine. I have feelings for Melissa. She has feelings for me. We've talked about it. We are not acting on it because I'm married and because we are working on healthy attachment. Healthy attachment, I said, and I felt the sarcasm load into my throat like a blown fuse. To someone who texts you at midnight, you are light. She didn't answer, and that was maybe the answer. There are times in a marriage when your self-respect is a little animal that needs water and you realize you've been forgetting to feed it. The next morning I stood in the kitchen, the smell of coffee blooming, and instead of doing what I've done since I was 22, taking a swallow that turns the volume down, I stared at the bottle of Irish whiskey we keep for guests and the cheap bar 2 blocks away and thought about how easy it would be to make the day quiet. Then I pictured crawling into the next morning with a hangover and a story about myself I'd hate. I'm not a program guy. I never had a day one, but I've been dry long enough to know the specific, terrible gratitude of choosing not to drink when drinking would make you win in the short term and lose your life on a layaway plan. I put the whiskey back in the cabinet like a person who still has a chance. On Friday, after the inspection downtown ran long and the foreman wanted me to sign off on a panel I didn't trust, I got an email notification from our joint account. A transfer had gone through to a new savings Sarah had opened at a different bank, one of those high-yield places with a name like a dog breed. $3,000 moved out for a teacher training deposit. I called Sarah from the cab of my truck, the heat making the steering wheel too hot to hold. "You opened a new account," I said. "You moved money without talking to me." "It's my income," she said. "I can invest in myself. The training is a step towards something sustainable. You know I hate accounting." "You hate being bored, not having money," I said, and immediately regretted the cruelty because it was accurate. "Melissa says," she started, and we both heard it. "This is our marriage," I said, "not Melissa's practice." The line went silent long enough. I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, in that voice you use with clients you are trying not to offend, "We can talk about financial boundaries." On Saturday morning, a certified letter arrived because the universe likes to pile everything at once. It was from the HOA, the people who measure life in Lawn Heights. Someone had reported that we were conducting commercial activity out of our home. Turns out the women's circle Sarah hosted on Thursday nights counts as a class. The letter said fines accrue after a warning. There was a photo attached, time-stamped, of women in leggings carrying yoga mats up our walk, Melissa's face bright at the end of the line like a coach leading her team into a stadium. I stared at the photo and felt that prickly scalp sensation I always get when wiring meets water, and you remember that both give life and both can kill you. I told Sarah we needed to pause the circles until we sorted what we were doing. She agreed, sort of, the way people agree when their plan is to ignore you once you've left the room. On Sunday evening, around the time the sky in Austin goes that bruised purple that makes you regret every fight you've ever had because it makes everything look forgivable, Melissa knocked on our door. She didn't text first. She didn't ask to come by. She showed up like a delivery. Sarah looked guilty in a fresh way. "I didn't know she was coming," she said. I believed her. My anger is precise when it wants to be. We sat at our dining table like a couple dealing with an insurance adjuster. Melissa placed both hands on the wood as if she were grounding herself. Up close, she looked older than the Instagram, which gave me the petty pleasure you get when you realize filtered faces return to being bodies. "I won't take much time," Melissa said, and her voice was practiced soft in a way that made me think of the 6:00 a.m. meditation app Sarah listens to. I care about Sarah. She's an adult. She makes her own choices. I also care about community ethics. I never want to be the reason a family suffers. "You're already the reason," I said evenly. She didn't flinch. "I am not sleeping with your wife," she said. "That's a boundary we're keeping. What you think you saw, I can explain it. We were practicing a hold we use in the circles to soothe the nervous system. It looks like hand-holding. It's in service of healing." "Right," I said. "A healing hold in a dark car." "I'm sorry for the optics," she said, and I almost laughed because I didn't know therapists used the word optics when they weren't on TV. Sarah cleared her throat. "We've talked about this," she said, "to both of us. I've said I will stop the late-night stuff. I will be transparent. I'll go to counseling, but I'm not going to criminalize connection. I need this." "What you need and what we need may be different," I said, and the simplicity dropped into the room like a wrench. Melissa glanced at Sarah for permission. Sarah nodded. Melissa said, "We're not asking your permission, Mike." Then she softened the blade with a smile that felt manufactured in the way expensive things sometimes are. "We're asking for your trust." "Those are not the same," I said. She left soon after, the lemon eucalyptus scent peeling in the air behind her like a sticker you can't unsee once you've stared too long. Monday took its job seriously. My crew had a rough-in at a new build off South Lamar. The GC was the kind of guy who calls you buddy and means the opposite. Halfway through the day, while I was tracing a run for recessed lights in a living room framed by windows you could mistake for movie screens, my phone vibrated with a calendar notification I didn't recognize. Sarah had added an event, Safe Space Integration Session. It lasted 2 hours and recurred weekly. No location. I sat on the stud of a wall and stared at the rectangle of my phone until the GC yelled that if I wanted to keep the job, I'd need to keep my eyes on the wires. That's the thing about life. It keeps happening right there next to you like a toddler that will put a penny into a socket if you look away. That night, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop called Pause Plan. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have a therapist's vocabulary, but I know how to plan loads on a breaker panel so you don't trip the whole house every time someone runs the dryer and the dishwasher at once. That's a life skill. I listed utilities. I listed auto pays. I listed which account would cover the mortgage if we split our checking into two. I put childcare hours in their own row and added conditional formatting so I could see where the handoffs would live. When I was done, it looked like a tidy map of a disaster. Sarah came to the doorway. She was in a hoodie I liked because it made her look like the college girl I'd fallen in love with while lifting a sagging couch up 3 flights of stairs. For a second, my brain tried to go back to that stairwell and pretend we were only tired. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Building us a pause," I said. She walked around the table like it was an exhibit. "What does that mean?" "It means we separate finances. You keep your income in your account, I keep mine in mine. We split the joint bills down the middle. No retreats paid from the joint. No teacher training deposits unless we agree." She laughed then, short and disbelieving. "You think money is the problem." "I think money is a problem I can put a fence around," I said. "Until you know what you're choosing." She sat across from me, arms folded. For all Melissa's talk of nervous systems, this was the first time I'd seen Sarah in fight or flight without the gloss. "I am choosing myself," she said, and the certainty made my throat burn. "Are you choosing me?" I asked. "Not the marriage, not the house, not the kids. Me, a man who has spent an adult life being competent because it's easier than being loved." She looked away. "You can learn more from a face trying not to move than from a speech." "I don't know," she said. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house went into that deep creek that old houses in Austin do when the temperature drops 5 degrees and wood remembers it was a tree, I found myself on the sidewalk outside the bar at the corner. The sign glowed like something biblical. My hand found the door handle and I could feel the future on the other side, a soft drown, a mean peace. Then I saw the gym across the street, fluorescent and ugly and honest. I crossed before I could get dramatic about it, paid the day fee, and put my hands on cold steel. I loaded the bar until it made sense. I squatted until the noise in my head didn't lead. I deadlifted until the voice that wanted whiskey shut up like a kid finally out of questions. I didn't heal anything. I made a choice I could live with twice. Once not to self-destruct, once to be sore in a way that meant I'd done something on purpose. When I came home, Sarah was in bed, a book tented on her chest. She looked at me and didn't ask where I'd been. I put my wallet on the dresser louder than necessary, like a caveman leaving proof of existence. "Do you love her?" I said in the dark. Sarah waited. The neighbor's motion-activated light flared and made our room look like a stage for a play where nothing happens and everything does. "I loved the attention," she said. "I love how she looks at me like I matter beyond the lunch I pack and the invoices I submit. I love not being the least interesting person in my own day." "And me?" I said. She took a breath. "You could have balanced a glass of water on. I love you because you haven't made me pay for saying that." That honesty, jagged as it was, reached into a place I hadn't noticed I'd kept dark. I nodded, which is a stupid thing to do in the dark. "I'm choosing sobriety," I said, and the word meant more than just the bottle, even without you. We didn't touch. There are nights when the distance saves you. Over the next week, we made the pause a fact. 2 accounts, a shared calendar with logistics, and nothing else, no poetry allowed. Rules about Melissa that felt both firm and humiliating, like telling a child not to run with scissors while handing them a chainsaw. No, Melissa at the house. No, one-on-one in cars. Group events fine. If they wanted to see each other, it needed a third. Sarah agreed, eyes flat. Melissa sent a message through Sarah that made me want to throw my phone into Town Lake. I honor your boundaries. I told a single friend. Not the guy who would make jokes to make me feel better, not the guy who would rage so I didn't have to. My friend Mark, who once sat with me when my dad died and didn't talk for an hour because grief is a language you don't always translate. He listened and said, "Do you want to win or do you want to be okay?" And I said, "I don't even know what winning is here." And he said, "Okay is a set of choices you make every day until one day you realize you've made a life." There were small mercies. The HOA backed off when Sarah moved the circle to the park pavilion. The twins decided the word retreat sounded like treat and demanded donuts the next time Sarah packed a bag. Work steadied. I stopped forgetting the tool bag at the shop. The ring cam kept capturing Melissa's Subaru in our neighborhood, but always during daylight, always a row of women behind her, never alone, never the dark. I didn't let myself believe it meant anything beyond compliance. We went to counseling once. The therapist had the kind of soft voice that makes your hard truth sound safe coming out, even when it isn't. Sarah said she wanted permission to explore. I said I wanted a marriage with a person in it who would choose me out loud. The therapist said, complexity is real. I said my heart is not a group project. The talk at home changed key. The heat of fight burned off, and what remained was an honesty I could stand near without blistering. We started using sentences like, "I'm not ready to make a decision and I need space this weekend." She stopped pretending Melissa was a rumor and called it a choice she was still not making with her body and maybe never would. I stopped pretending that not drinking was enough and made a list of other ways I could be an adult in my own life. Cooked actual meals, not just the grill, made doctor appointments I'd been ignoring. Fixed the squeak at the base of the stairs that had been telling everyone where you were at midnight since 2017. 2 weeks into the pause, we sat on the front steps after the kids were down, paper cups of ice water sweating rings onto the concrete. Bats clicked in the pecan tree. I told her about a job I'd bid on that could move me from wrench turner to crew lead. She told me she was thinking of applying to a part-time bookkeeping gig at a non-profit so she wasn't only doing Melissa's books. We looked at the street without touching, and for the first time since the Subaru, I felt like maybe we were two humans again, not just a war. "What's your maximum?" she asked me out of nowhere. "For what?" I said. "For waiting," she said. "For me to know what I'm choosing." The old me would have given a heroic speech about forever. The me who'd recently rehearsed boundaries like a monologue swallowed and said, "Long enough for me to look back and be proud of how I behaved. Not long enough to become a person I don't recognize." She nodded. "That feels fair." It was not a happily ever after. It wasn't even a happily for a while. It was a set of rails on a cliff and a commitment not to jump while the view messed with our judgment. On a Sunday afternoon that pretended to be fall even though Texas knows better, we packed the twins into the truck and drove to Zilker to play on the big rocks. Melissa was there with a group of women doing breathwork under a tree. Sarah glanced once and then kept walking. The twins climbed, grubby and glorious. I spotted them with open hands in case they fell. Sarah sat beside me on a bench and we watched our children do brave things that looked like mistakes until they weren't. "I don't want to lose this," she said. "You might," I said, and she nodded because love is not a guarantee, it's a series of maintained connections like any circuit. It trips, you reset, sometimes you rewrite the entire panel. Weeks later, a message popped up on my phone at 10:04 p.m. from a number I didn't recognize. It said only, "Thank you for keeping it clean." I knew whose voice that was even without a name. I didn't reply. I put the phone face down. I went to the garage and loaded the bar again. The steel didn't care about my dignity or my pain. It asked a simple question with each rep, "Are you here?" And the answer, for the first time in a long time, was yes. I don't know the end yet. Maybe we split gently and send the kids between houses where they feel more loved than confused. Maybe we rebuild something sturdier than what we had because we actually talk, because we see the places we let go slack. Maybe the attraction that felt electric burns itself out under the cold water of reality. Maybe it doesn't. I can't wire the future. I can only keep myself from sparking the wrong way and burning everything down to ash. Here's what I do know. Betrayal isn't always a body. Sometimes it's a hand held too long in a parked car, a transfer you see in your banking app, a series of photos of sunsets that aren't yours. It cuts the same, sometimes deeper because you can't point to a bruise and call it evidence. You can only point to yourself and say, "That is mine. I get to decide what I do with it." If you were me, would you take the pause and build new boundaries, or would you walk away before the line gets crossed in a way nobody can deny? Where is your line between connection and betrayal when the body hasn't followed the heart yet? If this story made you think, tell me what you would have done and why, and if you've ever chosen the gym over the bar when your life was splitting, like and subscribe if you want more first-person stories that don't pretend the decisions are simple.